The wind screamed through the trees of Sherwood, like the cries of the damned. I remember it still. Even now, as I write these words, beneath the weak candlelight of Blackthorn Abbey, I hear that ancient forest calling beyond the hills, whispering through the night, as though the woods themselves still hunger. My name no longer matters. The brothers here simply call me the Monk of Blackthorn Abbey, and what I am about to tell you is forbidden knowledge. For there are truths buried beneath England's forests that Holy Scripture does not speak of openly, ancient things, older than kings, older than churches, older perhaps than man himself. This tale began in the winter of 1194, during the reign of King Richard, when snow covered the roads like aerial cloth, and the poor starved beneath cruel taxes imposed by the Sheriff of Nottingham. It was on such a night that a wounded traveller arrived at our abbey gates. Brother Odo found him collapsed beside the frozen well before dawn, half dead beneath the snow. His horse was missing, his cloak torn to ribbons, as though dragged through thorn bushes for miles. But it was not the blood that frightened us. It was the antler mark, burned into his chest. I watched Abbot Severin uncover the wound beside the fire. The symbol had been carved deep into the flesh, a twisted crown of blackened antlers surrounding a single staring eye. The traveller awoke screaming, not in pain, in terror. "He walks again," the man whispered. No one spoke. Outside, the abbey bells groaned in the wind. The traveller gripped my robe with frozen fingers. "You must bar the doors before nightfall," he begged. "The forest god has awakened." Brother Matthias muttered a prayer beneath his breath, but the traveller shook violently. "You do not understand," he whispered. "Robin Hood has broken the old pact." At the mention of that outlaw's name, several brothers exchanged uneasy glances, for everyone in Nottinghamshire and Forest knew the legends, the old stories villagers spoke only beside dying fires, stories of the spirit called Hern, the Horned King of Sherwood, a hunter who was neither man nor beast, a thing that watched from between the trees. And as the storm outside darkened the stained-glass windows of Blackthorn Abbey, the traveller began to describe what he had seen beneath the ancient oaks of Sherwood Forest. And may God forgive me, I believed him. The traveller's name was Edwin of Locksley. At least, that is what he claimed, before fear hollowed the man into something scarcely human. We carried him to the warming chamber, beside the abbey kitchens, where herbs burned over the fire, and melted snow dripped steadily from the stone gutters outside. Yet, even there, surrounded by candlelight and holy symbols, the man trembled, as though icy hands still clutched his soul. Abbot Severin demanded the truth. Edwin stared into the flames for a long while before speaking. "It began 3 nights ago," he whispered, "near the western ruins beyond Sherwood. At once, the older monks crossed themselves. The western ruins were ancient, even before the Norman kings arrived. Broken stones swallowed by roots, pagan ground, avoided by hunters and priests alike. Edwin swallowed hard. I rode with 6 men from Nottingham, tax collectors under the sheriff's command. We were sent to seize hidden grain from villagers aiding Robin Hood. The fire crackled sharply. Outside, thunder rolled across the winter hills. One of the soldiers found a great oak marked with strange carvings, antlers, eyes, symbols cut deep into the bark. Edwin's voice weakened. The captain laughed and ordered the tree burned. Brother Matthias muttered, "Fools." Edwin nodded slowly. The flames would not catch. Silence swallowed the chamber. We poured lamp oil upon the trunk. Still, it would not burn. Then, his breathing quickened. We heard the horn, not a hunting call, not human. A deep sound, like the roar of some monstrous beast, echoing through the forest itself. Edmund's hands shook uncontrollably now. The horses panicked first. 2 tore free into the woods. Then the fog came. I remember how every monk leaned closer to the fire as he spoke those words. Even now, years later, I can still hear the terror in his voice. "Shapes moved between the trees," Edwin whispered. "Tall shapes, with antlers." Brother Odo tried to speak, but Edwin seized his arm violently. They were not men. The candles flickered. For a moment, the chamber darkened. Then Edwin uttered the words I shall never forget, and beside them walked Robin Hood himself. Several brothers gasped aloud. But Edwin's horrified eyes remained fixed upon the fire. He was kneeling before the Horned One. A dreadful silence filled the warming chamber after Edwin spoke those words. Even the fire seemed weaker. No man of Nottinghamshire could hear the name of Robin Hood without stirring some feeling, admiration among the poor, hatred among the nobles, fear among the sheriff's men. But this was something far darker. Abbot Severn rose slowly from his chair beside the hearth. His old face looked carved from stone beneath the candlelight. "You claim Robin Hood serves this forest demon?" he asked coldly. Edwin swallowed. "I claim only what I saw." Brother Matthias paced nervously near the narrow windows. Snow rattled softly against the glass outside. "The outlaw protects peasants from cruel taxes," Matthias muttered. "He spools coin, not souls." Edwin looked toward him with hollow eyes. "That is what I once believed." A gust of wind roared through the abbey corridors beyond the chamber, carrying with it the distant droning of the great bell tower above Blackthorn Abbey. For reasons I could not explain, the sound unsettled me deeply. Edwin leaned closer to the fire. The fog surrounded us so thickly we could scarcely see our own hands. Then the horn sounded again. His voice trembled. One soldier fled into the trees screaming. "And?" whispered Brother Oda. Edwin stared into the flames. "We heard him praying for mercy." The traveller's face had become pale as ash. Then came the sound of tearing flesh. Brother Odo crossed himself immediately. No one spoke. "The captain ordered us forward," Edwin continued. "He swore Robin Hood was using tricks to frighten us. But the deeper we walked, the stranger the forest became. He described trees twisted like rasping claws. ancient stones covered in moss and strange carvings, dead animals hanging from branches, with antlers woven through their ribs, and everywhere eyes watching from the dark. The fog opened near a ruined circle of standing stones, Edwin whispered. That was where we saw them. The room felt colder now, despite the fire. Hooded figures stood around the stones, carrying torches of green flame. Some wore deer skulls upon their heads. His breathing quickened again, and in the centre knelt Robin Hood. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Edwin's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. He was offering blood to the Horned King. At that exact moment, the abbey bell rang by itself above us. One enormous strike. Bong! Every monk froze. Then from somewhere far beyond the monastery walls, deep within the storm-covered hills surrounding Sherwood Forest, a hunting horn answered the bell. The sound of the hunting horn rolled across the winter hills, like the cry of some ancient beast awakened from sleep. Every brother in the chamber turned pale. Even Abbot Severin, a man who had faced plague, famine, and war, without trembling, slowly made the sign of the cross. Again, the horn echoed through the night, long, deep, inhuman. Edwin nearly fell from his chair in terror. "He's found me," he whispered. Brother Matthias rushed toward the shutters and forced them closed against the storm outside, though none of us had seen anything beyond the snow and darkness, yet the feeling remained. Something was watching Blackthorn Abbey, something patient. The fire suddenly hissed low, and shadows stretched strangely across the stone walls like twisted branches clawing inward. Abbot Severin ordered every monk to the chapel for midnight prayer. No one argued. We moved through the cold corridors, carrying candles, while the storm battered the ancient abbey outside. I remember the silence most clearly. No footsteps, no whispered prayers, only fear. The chapel of Blackthorn Abbey stood at the heart of the monastery, its vaulted ceiling lost in darkness above rows of worn stone pillars. Saints stared down from cracked, stained glass, while candlelight flickered across the old tombs beneath the floor. Edwin refused to enter. He remained near the doorway, shaking violently. "He cannot cross holy ground," Brother Odo assured him. But Edwin only whispered, "That is not what the old stories say." The monks began chanting Latin prayers as Abbot Severin raised the great silver crucifix above the altar. Then came the third horn blast, closer this time, so close the chapel windows trembled. The chanting stopped instantly. Outside, horses screamed somewhere in the abbey stables. A terrible crashing followed. Brother Matthias hurried toward the doors, but before he reached them, something struck the chapel roof above us, heavy, massive. Dust rained from the beams overhead. Another impact followed. Slow footsteps, walking across the roof. Several monks cried out in fear. Then came the sound that froze the blood in my veins forever. A low breathing above us, not human breathing, animal, wet and monstrous. Edwin collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "He came for the blood debt," he whispered. Suddenly the chapel candles extinguished. All at once, darkness swallowed us. And from somewhere high within the blackness above the altar, Two enormous glowing eyes opened in the dark. Panic seized the chapel. Several monks screamed aloud as the monstrous eyes stared down from the darkness above the altar, burning like coals within the rafters of Blackthorn Abbey. I could hear Brother Odo's sobbing prayers beside me. The air itself smelled wrong now. Wet earth, rotting leaves, and the foul scent of some wild creature dragged from the deepest parts of Sherwood Forest. Abbot Severin alone remained standing. Though fear trembled in his hands, he lifted the silver crucifix toward the darkness. "In the name of Almighty God," he cried, "show yourself." The glowing eyes did not move. Then a sound came from above us. Not a roar, not quite laughter, something between the two. A deep, rasping noise that seemed to vibrate through the stone walls themselves. Several candles reignited suddenly across the chapel. Their weak flames revealed the rafters overhead. Empty. Nothing stood there. The eyes had vanished. For one brief moment, relief swept through the chapel. Then Brother Matthias pointed toward the western windows, and we saw them, figures standing outside in the snow, dozens of them. Tall silhouettes, motionless beneath the storm, half hidden by swirling fog and moonlight. Some carried bows, others held spears tipped with bone. Nearly all wore antlers upon their heads. Forest cultists, or something worse. At their center stood a towering shape, draped in dark animal hides. Its antlers stretched like twisted branches toward the sky. No face could be seen beneath the hood, only darkness. Edwin fell backward in terror. "Hern," he whispered. The Horned King slowly raised one enormous hand toward the abbey. At once the wolves began howling across the hills. Not one wolf, hundreds. The sound surrounded Blackthorn Abbey from every direction. Brother Odo bolted the chapel doors, while others dragged benches against them. Though deep inside, I think we all knew wood and iron would never stop whatever stood beyond those walls. Then the horn sounded again. So close now, it felt inside my skull. One of the younger monks began bleeding from his nose. Another collapsed, screaming that something moved beneath the chapel floor. Abbot Severin ordered us to remain together, but before another prayer could be spoken, voice echoed from outside the chapel doors, calm, human, terribly familiar. "Open the abbey," the voice said softly. Edwin's face turned white as death, because he recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to Robin Hood. No man moved. The storm outside raged like the wrath of heaven itself. Yet the voice beyond the chapel doors remained calm and steady. "Open the abbey." Again, silence followed. Then Abbot Severin stepped forward slowly, gripping the silver crucifix with whitening fingers. "Robin Voloxley," he called through the heavy oak doors, "if that truly is you, come in peace and enter God's house alone." For several heartbeats there came no reply, only the distant howling of wolves beyond the monastery walls. Then the voice answered, "I cannot." A terrible unease passed through the chapel. Brother Matthias frowned. Why? The response came softer now. Because he walks beside me. At those words, Edwin began trembling violently again. Outside, something massive shifted in the snow. We heard hooves grinding against frozen earth, but no horse breathed beyond the doors. Only that slow, unnatural movement. Abbot Severin ordered 2 monks to lift the wooden bar carefully. Fear shivered through every soul within the chapel as the great doors creaked open, a single hand's width. Snow and icy wind burst inward instantly, extinguishing half the candles, and standing beyond the threshold was Robin Hood himself, or the shadow of the man he had once been. His green cloak hung torn and soaked with snow. Frost covered his beard and long dark hair. A bow rested across his back, beside a quiver filled with black feathered arrows. But it was his eyes that chilled my blood. They looked exhausted, haunted, like a man who had not truly slept in years. Behind him stood the forest, and within the swirling fog between the trees, towering antlers moved slowly in the darkness. Robin kept his gaze lowered. "You must close the gates before midnight," he said. "The abbey bells anger him." Abbot Severin stared coldly. "You serve this demon." Robin's jaw tightened painfully. "I serve Sherwood." "The devil wears many names," Matthias spat. Robin ignored the insult. "He was old before your churches were built," he whispered. "The forest belonged to him, long before kings claimed England." A deep horn echoed somewhere behind him, closer than ever. Robin visibly flinched. "He grows stronger each night," he warned. "The sheriff spilled innocent blood beneath the sacred oaks." "Now Hern wakes hungry," Edwin suddenly shouted from the chapel. "You sacrificed men to him." Robin looked toward the terrified traveller with sorrow in his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "I tried to stop him." Then, at last, Robin lifted his head fully toward us. For the first time, I saw fresh claw marks carved deep across his throat. Not wounds made by any human hand. The claw marks upon Robin Hood's throat looked black beneath the moonlight, as though the flesh itself had begun to rot around the wounds. Even Abbot Severin recoiled. Robin stepped no closer to the chapel doors. It was then I noticed something strange. Her snow fell heavily across the courtyard. None touched him. The flakes seemed to melt before reaching his cloak. Behind him, deep within the fog-shrouded trees surrounding Blackthorn Abbey, the towering antlered shadow continued moving slowly between the trunks, watching, waiting. Robin lowered his voice. "You must listen carefully. Before dawn, Hern will call the wild hunt." Brother Odo whispered a frightened prayer at those words. Even among peasants, the legend of the wild hunt was feared of nearly all others. Ghostly riders who swept through forests at night, carrying damned souls into darkness. Abbot Severin tightened his grip upon the crucifix. "What does Cucci want?" Robin's expression hardened with grief. "Blood for the sacred woods the sheriff burned." He glanced toward the distant hills. and the return of the old pact. Edwin stepped forward, trembling. What pact? For several moments Sir Robin remained silent. Then finally he spoke. Centuries ago, when kings hunted Sherwood without mercy, the old forest tribes offered Hern in a bargain. No lord would take more from the woods than needed. No child would starve while game still roamed the forest. His tired eyes lifted toward us. In return, Hern protected Sherwood. A cold wind swept through the chapel doorway. Robin continued. But the Norman laws broke the pact long ago. They hanged peasants, burned sacred groves, slaughtered deer for sport. His voice darkened. Now, Hern believes all men have become thieves. Suddenly the wolves outside fell silent. Every monk froze. That silence frightened me more than the howling had. Robin slowly turned toward the forest. He comes. The fog between the trees thickened unnaturally fast, rolling across the snow-covered courtyard like living smoke. Then shapes emerged within it, tall riders mounted upon enormous black horses. Some carried spears, others dragged rusted chains behind them. None possessed visible faces beneath their antlered helms. Brother Matthias slammed the chapel doors shut instantly, while monks shoved benches against them with panicked cries. Outside, horses circled the abbey walls. Then came the sound of gigantic antlers scraping slowly across the chapel's stone. A voice, unlike any human voice, echoed through the storm, deep, ancient, hungry. Return, the oath. The voice shook the very stones of Blackthorn Abbey. Dust drifted from the chapel's ceiling as the monstrous words echoed through the dark halls beyond. Return, the oath. Some monks collapsed to their knees in terror. Others clutched rosaries so tightly their hands bled. Outside, the riders of the wild hunt circled endlessly through the storm. Their horses made no ordinary sound upon the snow, no hoofbeats, only a horrible scraping like bones dragged across frozen earth. Abbot Severin forced himself toward the chapel doors, despite the fear twisting across his face. "There is no oath with demons," he shouted. At once, something struck the outer walls with tremendous force. Stone cracked somewhere above us. The younger monks screamed. Then came another impact, and another. It sounded as though gigantic antlers hammered against the abbey itself. Robin Hood remained near the doorway, staring into the darkness beneath his hood. "He's losing control," he warned quietly. Brother Matthias glared at him. "You brought this evil here." Robin's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "No," he said, "your sheriff did." The outlaw stepped deeper into the chapel at last, though he visibly winced crossing the threshold of holy ground. He was once only a guardian spirit, Robin explained, ancient, dangerous, but bound by the old laws of the forest. The horn sounded again outside, closer than ever before. Robin continued speaking quickly now. "When the sacred oaks burned, the balance broke. Hern no longer sees guilt or innocence, only trespassers." Edwin backed away toward the altar. "You worshipped him." Robin looked toward the terrified traveller, with grief heavier than rage. "I tried to bargain with him." Suddenly the chapel floor trembled violently. Cracks spread across the ancient stones beneath our feet, and from somewhere deep below the abbey came knocking, slow, heavy knocks. Um, um, um. Brother Odo stared downward in horror. There are catacombs beneath the chapel, he whispered. Another knock answered him, louder. The stone floor bulged upward slightly. Then a terrible realization crossed Abbot Severin's face. The old crypt. I shall never forget the fear in his eyes then. For beneath Blackthorn Abbey lay ruins older than the monastery itself, forgotten tunnels built atop ancient pagan burial grounds, long before Christianity reached those hills. Robin stepped backward from the shaking floor. He's beneath us now. The chapel candles suddenly burned green, and from under the cracked stones came the sound of breathing, enormous breathing. Then the ancient voice whispered once more beneath our feet. You broke the forest. The chapel floor split apart with a sound like thunder. Monks stumbled backward, screaming as ancient stones cracked down the center of the aisle before the altar. Green fire burst upward through the widening fracture, filling the chapel with the stench of wet earth and rotting wood. Then something moved beneath the broken floor, not quickly, slowly, deliberately, as though it knew none within Blackthorn Abbey could escape. Brother Matthias raised a trembling torch toward the crack. I wished to God he had not, for deep below the chapel, within the darkness of forgotten crypt, we saw antlers, enormous antlers, far too massive to belong to any earthly creature. The thing beneath us began climbing upward. Stone groaned under its weight. Robin Hood stepped before the monks immediately, drawing a black feathered arrow from his quiver. Do not look directly into its eyes, he warned. Abbot Severin lifted the crucifix high. In God's name, leave this place. A terrible laugh echoed from below. Not human laughter. The sound of ancient trees creaking during a storm. Then the creature emerged. Its body seemed wrapped in darkness itself, shifting like smoke around enormous limbs covered in tangled roots and black fur. A crown of twisted antlers scraped the chapel ceiling, while pale animal skulls hung from its neck by cords of vine. But its face was almost human, almost. Beneath the antlers stare hollow eyes, glowing faint green, within a skull-like visage of bark and bone. Several monks collapsed instantly upon seeing it. The Horned King of Sherwood. The creature inhaled deeply as though savouring the fear surrounding us. Then its gaze fixed upon Robin Hood. You swore. The oath. Robin slowly lowered his bow. I swore to protect Shirley, and men destroyed it. The chapel walls trembled violently again. Outside, the wild hunt howled across the storm-covered hills. Robin's voice hardened. The sheriff burned the sacred groves, not these monks. Hern turned its monstrous head slowly toward us. The forest remembers all. Suddenly vines burst upward through the cracked chapel floor, wrapping around stone pillars and crawling toward the terrified brothers. Screams filled the chapel. Brother Odo was dragged to the ground as black roots coiled around his legs. Robin fired an arrow directly into Hern's chest. The creature did not bleed, but for the first time it screamed. a sound so ancient and full of rage that every candle in the chapel exploded into darkness at once, and in that blackness the wild hunt entered the abbey. Darkness swallowed the chapel as the riders of the wild hunt poured into Blackthorn Abbey. I heard horses breathing within the sacred hall, chains dragging across stone, the groaning of ancient saddles, yet no doors had opened. The riders emerged from the darkness itself. Their antlered helms scraped the pillars as ghostly black horses moved between the pews, their eyes glowing like dying embers. Beneath rusted armor, no human flesh remained, only shadow and drifting fog. The monks scattered in terror. Some prayed, some screamed, some simply froze where they stood. At the center of the ruined chapel towered Hern, the Horned King of Sherwood, roots twisting around his monstrous limbs, while green fire burned deep within his hollow eyes. And before him stood Robin Hood, alone. Snow and ash swirled through the shattered ceiling above them. Robin lowered his bow slowly. "You once guarded the innocent," he said. Hern's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Innocence died with the forest." Another rider emerged behind Robin, carrying a spear of black wood. The wild hunt had come not merely for blood, but for judgment. Robin removed the dagger from his belt and dropped it upon the chapel floor. Then, to my horror, he knelt before the creature. "I broke the oath," he said quietly. "Then take me." Instead, the wild hunt became still. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Hern stepped closer, towering above the kneeling outlaw. "You would die. For them?" Robin looked toward the terrified monks and whispered, "For England." For a long moment, the forest god said nothing. Then slowly, the monstrous creature placed one clawed hand upon Robin Hood's head. Green fire erupted through the chapel. The riders screamed. The wolves outside howled together across the hills of Sherwood. And before our eyes, Robin's body began turning to ash, not burning, changing. The wind carried him upward, like black snow, into the darkness above. Gone. The wild hunt vanished with him. The riders dissolved into drifting fog. The monstrous roots withdrew beneath the shattered floor, and Hern looked toward us one final time. The forest remembers. Then the Horned King disappeared into shadow. By dawn, the storm had ended. Sherwood stood silent once more. But to this very day, travellers crossing those woods avant nightfall still speak of a hooded figure walking beside a towering antlered shadow beneath ancient oaks. And whenever the hunting horn echoes through the mist, the poor leave bread at their doors for Robin Hood, the last guardian of Sherwood.